Section 27 of the American Book of the Dog. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Colleen McMahon. The American Book of the Dog, G. O. Shields, editor. Section 27, The Yorkshire Terrier, by P. H. Coombs. This little knight of the carpet is eminently an English production or manufacture, if we may use the term, and occupies a most prominent position in the canine world, being considered by many the handsomest of all long-haired terriers, and has been appropriately termed by one writer the little Yorkshire swell. Standing out in bold relief from most other toy varieties by his picturesque arrangement of coat, his color, his diminutive size, and his stylish form, and being preeminently the lady's pet, he has a reasonable claim to the distinction of being the most fashionable toy breed of the day in this country, as well as in England, where he originated. We are fortunate in being able to quote from various writers relating to the origin of the breed, and before committing ourselves to any opinion concerning this important subject, it is desirable to read what such writers have learned from their experience and investigation. Mr. Vero Shaw, in his Illustrated Book of the Dog, says on this point, "The origin of the breed is most obscure, for its originators, Yorkshire-like, were discreet enough to hold their own counsel, and kept their secrets to themselves. Whether this reticence on their part has had the effect of stifling the inquiries of curious persons, or whether the merits of the breed have hitherto been sufficiently unappreciated by the public, we cannot pretend to say. But we are aware of no correspondence or particular interest having been taken on the subject of the Yorkshire Terrier's origin. In certain works on the dog, however, deductions have been drawn, which no doubt are more or less worthy of respect. The Black and Tan Terrier, the Skye, and the Maltese are all credited with the paternity of the Yorkshire Terrier. That the breed in question resembles the Skye in certain details is evident, but in many important points the two varieties vary widely. For instance, the back of the Yorkshire Terrier must be short and the back of a Skye Terrier long. So, as regards shape at least, the Yorkshire man cannot be accused of a great resemblance to his northern neighbor. In our eyes the breed much more closely resembles the Maltese dog, save in color, but there is no doubt that some of our more typical breeds of terriers have been also drawn upon for his production. Many persons who are ignorant on doggy subjects persistently confuse the Yorkshire with what they term the Scotch Terrier, thereby meaning the Skye, we presume. There is, however, no visible ground or reason ever given for their opinions, which are certainly based on error and ignorance of the subject. Before leaving the subject of the Yorkshire Terrier's origin, it may be remarked that the puppies are born black in color, as are Dandy Dinmonts, and do not obtain their proper shade of coat until they are some months old. Searchers after the truth may here discover some connection, which we ourselves confess we do not, between the Yorkshire and Dandy Dinmont Terriers, in consequence of this peculiarity in the young of both varieties. Mr. Hugh Dalziel, in his British Dogs, says of this breed, "This dog long went by the name of Rough or Scotch Terrier, and many dog show committees in issuing their schedules still include them under that heading, but to call them Scotch is quite a misnomer, the true Scotch Terrier being a much rougher, shorter, and harder coated dog, of greater size and hardiness, and altogether a rough and tumble vermin dog. That the Yorkshire Terrier should have been called Scotch by those who, although they may have the credit of producing this dog, probably did not know of the existence of the real Scotch Terrier as a breed, suggests that at least a Terrier of Scotland has had something to do with his manufacture. Now among Terriers recognized as Scotch, if not now peculiar to the country, we have the old hard, short-coated Scotch Terrier par excellence, the short-legged and mixed-coated Dandy, the Skyes with long weasel-like bodies and long hard coat, and the perky little prick-eared, hard and short-coated Aberdonian, and in addition the Glasgow or Paisley Skye, a more toyish dog, shorter in back and comparatively soft and silky in coat, which it probably inherits from a Maltese Terrier cross. My theory, then, respecting the origin of the Yorkshire Terriers, and I admit it is only a theory, for the most diligent and repeated inquiries on my part in all likely or promising quarters have failed in elucidating reliable facts, and none certainly contradictory to my views, is that the dog is what gardeners call a sport, from some lucky combination of one of the Scotch Terriers, either the genuine Skye or Paisley Toy, and one of the old soft and longish coated black and tan English Terriers, at one time common enough, and probably a dash of Maltese blood in it. Mr. G. H. Wilkinson says, in his article published in the English Stock Keeper in 1887, and we shall quote from this quite extensively throughout this chapter, for the reason that it contains some valuable information relating to the breed that has not, we believe, appeared in book form concerning the history as learned by him. In commencing an article on the Yorkshire Terrier, it is necessary to trace back its origin as far as possible. With this object in view, I have been at some trouble in looking up several old fanciers, one of whom, John Richardson of Halifax, is now in his 67th year, and very interesting it was to hear this aged man go back to the good old days of over half a century ago. I regret, however, that although we can find men who have been in the fancy so long, the origin of the Yorkshire Terrier is somewhat obscure. 50 years ago there was in Halifax and the immediate neighborhood a type of dog called at that time, and even within these last 20 years, a waterside terrier, a little game dog, varying in weight from 6 to 20 pounds, mostly about 10 pounds weight, a dog resembling very much the present Welsh and Airedale Terrier on a small scale. At this period these dogs were bred for the purpose of hunting and killing rats. They would go into the river and work with a ferret, and were just in their element when put into a rat pit. An almost daily occurrence at that time was to back them to kill a given number of rats in a given time. It seems almost a pity that such a breed should have become extinct. Mr. Richardson himself owned a little bitch called Polly, who weighed 6 pounds, and she was frequently put into a rat pit with a dozen rats, the whole of which she would speedily kill against time. She would also swim the river and hunt with the ferret. This little bitch, I am told, had 4 or 5 inches of coat on each side of her body, with a white or silver head. At that time, however, the average specimen was a shorter coated dog with grizzle gray, hardish coat. It, however, seems to me, and is also the opinion of many old fanciers whom I have consulted, that they were the ancestors for the present breed. There is no doubt also that the blood of the Skye Terrier was introduced at some remote period, which may account for the longer coat and long body that existed some 10 or 15 years later. No care or definite object, however, seems to have been aimed at in breeding at this time beyond getting a dog thoroughly game. It seems that it was more by good luck than management that about 20 or 30 years ago a longer and softer coated dog became known. It must also be borne in mind that at this time their coats were not cultivated as they were later on. Dog shows were almost unknown in those days, and even later were scarce. From these and other earlier writers, we would be led to infer that the origin of this breed was of the greatest uncertainty and of a most mysterious nature. That such writers were, however, highly qualified to offer sound and most valuable opinions on the subject generally, is proved by the admirable manner in which they have treated the principal characteristics descriptive of the breed, and all specially interested in the breed should read the entire subject as treated by such writers as Shaw, Dalziel, Wilkinson, Bootman, Watson, and others. No doubt much difficulty has been experienced in obtaining information relating to its early history, and one opinion, as expressed by Shaw, seems to be that substantially the history was known, but that it was kept a secret. It would be manifestly unjust to deprive the Yorkshire Terrier of the title to a pedigree running back to the progenitors of the breed, and the continued correspondence on and investigation into the subject by those most deeply interested, together with their better acquaintance with old breeders and fanciers, a condition undoubtedly brought about through the agency of the improved quality and increased number of dog shows, and the intense desire on the part of such people to arrive at an accurate, intelligent explanation of the origin of such a popular breed, relieves us from adding any further testimony relating to the mystery of the origin of this breed. In an interesting article on this breed, published in the Century Magazine in 1886, and written by Mr. James Watson of Philadelphia, is given about the first public information tending to positively identify its origin, to a certain extent at least. The writer says, "Some of our authorities have attempted to throw a great deal of mystery about the origin of the Yorkshire Terrier where none really exists. If we consider that the mill operatives who originated the breed by careful selection of the best long-coated small Terriers they could find were nearly all ignorant men, unaccustomed to imparting information for public use, we may see some reason why reliable facts have not been easily attained. Those early writers show but little knowledge of the possibilities of selection. Stonehenge, for instance, in his early editions, speaks of it being impossible for a dog with a 3-inch coat and 7-inch beard to be a descendant of the soft-coated Scotch Terrier without a cross of some kind. The absurdity of this is seen when we remember that within a few years of the date of his history, Yorkshire Terriers were shown with 12 inches of coat. Then again, he speaks of the King Charles Spaniel as being employed to give the blue and tan, than which a more ridiculous statement could not have been penned. To get a blue and tan, long, straight, silky coat, breeders were not likely to employ a black and tan dog with a wide chest, tucked up loin, a round bullet head, large protruding eyes, and heavy spaniel ears. The idea is too absurd to be entertained for a moment. As a raid against all the conjectures of theorists, I have in my possession a letter from Mrs. M. A. Foster, of Bradford, England, who, in writing of the dog Bradford Hero, the winner of 97 first prizes, says, "The pedigree of Bradford Hero includes all the best dogs for 35 years back, and they were all originally bred from Scotch Terriers and shown as such until a few years back. The name of Yorkshire Terrier was given to them on account of their being improved so much in Yorkshire." Following this, and about a year later, Mr. Ed Bootman, of Halifax, England, furnished an article on the origin of the breed for publication in the English Stock Keeper, which that journal, feeling the importance of all facts relating to the origin of the breed, published as follows: "Swift's Old Crab, a crossbred Scotch Terrier, Kershaw's Kitty, a Skye, and an old English Terrier bitch kept by J. Whittam, then residing in Hatter's Fold, Halifax, were the progenitors of the present race of Yorkshire Terriers. These dogs were in the zenith of their fame 40 years ago. The owner of Old Crab was a native of Halifax and a joiner by trade. He worked at Oldham for some time as a journeyman, and then removed to Manchester, where he kept a public house. Whether he got Crab at Oldham or Manchester I have not been able to ascertain. He had him when in Manchester, and from there sent him several times to Halifax on a visit to Kitty. The last visit would be about 1850. Crab was a dog of about 8 or 9 pounds weight, with a good terrier head and eye, but with a long body, resembling the Scotch Terrier. The legs and muzzle only were tanned, and the hair on the body would be about 3 or 4 inches in length. He has stood for years in a case in a room of the Westgate Hotel, a public house which his owner kept when he returned to his native town, where I believe the dog may be seen today. Kitty was a bitch different in type from Crab. She was a drop-eared Skye, with plenty of coat of a blue shade, but destitute of tan on any part of the body. Like Crab, she had no pedigree. She was originally stolen from Manchester, and sent to a man named Jackson, a saddler in Huddersfield, who, when it became known that a £5 reward was offered in Manchester for her recovery, sent her to a person named Harrison, then a waiter at the White Swan Hotel, Halifax, to escape detection, and from Harrison she passed into the hands of Mr. J. Kershaw, of Bishop Blaise, a public house which once stood on the Old North Bridge, Halifax. Prior to 1851, Kitty had 6 litters, all of which, I believe, were by Crab. In these 6 litters she had 36 puppies, 28 of which were dogs, and served to stock the district with rising sires. After 1851, when she passed into the possession of Mr. F. Jagger, she had 44 puppies, making a total of 80. Mr. Whittam's bitch, whose name I cannot get to know, was an old English Terrier, with tanned head, ears, and legs, and a sort of grizzle back. She was built on the lines of speed. Like the others, she had no pedigree. She was sent when a puppy to the late Bernard Hartley, of Allen Gate, Halifax, by a friend residing in Scotland. When Mr. Hartley had got tired of her, he gave her to his coachman, Mason, who in turn gave her to his friend Whittam, and Whittam used her years for breeding purposes. Although this bitch came from Scotland, it is believed that the parents were from this district. The last named writer has so fully identified the 3 dogs first employed to manufacture the breed, together with their names, ownership, characteristics, and other facts concerning them, that there can be no doubt as to the authenticity of the history of the origin of the breed. His history, although published in the Stock Keeper in 1887, has never been publicly contradicted, and it is evident that there can now be no grounds for following the reasoning of writers who claim that the origin is a mystery. The development since that time, judging from an examination of the pedigrees of the most prominent dogs of the breed, has been the result of judicious selection from and breeding with dogs that most nearly approached what fanciers and breeders thought ought to be the type, and it is probable that so long as a dog of this breed was known to have some of the blood of the original Old Crab, Kershaw's Kitty, and Whittam's bitch, the sole progenitors of the breed, former breeders did not inquire too curiously into the pedigree of all the dogs used. This seems to be a reasonable supposition, and should fully account, in the case of some prominent dogs, for a lack of a complete pedigree running back to the 3 dogs above named. It is a well-established fact that the principal strains have been most jealously guarded by the people in the north of England. In noting the development of the breed up to its present standard, it may be stated, to commence with, that it has been principally accomplished by the people, mostly operatives in cotton and woolen mills, in the counties of Yorkshire and Lancashire, England, where it originated. Unfortunately, at its first appearance at our shows, almost anything in the shape of a Terrier having a long coat, with some shade or effect of blue on the body, fawn or silver, more frequently the latter, colored head and legs, with tail docked and ears trimmed, was received and admired as a Yorkshire Terrier by most everyone except the few competent judges, and the breed, fashionable as it is still much neglected in this country, for the reasons that its care is not so well understood as that of many other breeds, and a good specimen soon loses its fine show condition by reason of lack of that regular and well-directed care necessary to cultivate and keep the coat looking right. Dog shows have, however, had the same effect on this as on other breeds. With the annual improvement in quality of the dogs exhibited, people have learned more about the points required of a well-bred specimen, and the worst type of dogs claiming title to the name has almost disappeared from our shows. Terrier properties should be, and are, considered by competent judges, for although toys, they are essentially Terriers and called Terriers. Consequently, there is no valid reason why they should not be recognized as such. More competent judges are also now to be obtained by the managers of our shows, although it must not be taken for granted that all acting in this capacity are thoroughly educated, or united on the standard as established for the breed, to recognize one regular type. But it is pleasant to note that much improvement has been made within the past few years in this direction, and that the rapid increase in number of typical specimens has served to educate fanciers to a better idea of what the breed ought to be, and the Yorkshire Terrier classes are now, in the majority of instances, well represented, in point of numbers as well as quality, at most of our important shows. The Yorkshire, like other Terriers, is naturally remarkable for its sagacity, alertness, courage, and eagerness in the pursuit of vermin, although many of the small, weak, inbred specimens have undoubtedly lost much of the Terrier instinct. The natural courage of the breed is such, however, that it will readily resist attacks from dogs much larger than itself, and, as a ratter, would quickly obey the natural instinct if allowed to do so. But wisdom on the part of the owner usually prevents a small, valuable dog from enjoying such recreation. They are essentially toys, and as a rule are most interesting and cunning as companions and house dogs, and the large number of ladies and children attracted to their cages wherever they are shown indicates, to some extent, their popularity. All previous writers, except Mr. Bootman, state that the color of puppies when born is black and tan, but the latter states that mouse color and tan, and even fawn, are not unfrequently seen. Blue or mouse-colored puppies have also been observed to some extent in my experience, and they being bred from the best stock obtainable, I can corroborate the statement made by Mr. Bootman. We also learn, through some of the English fanciers, that some of the first prize winners of that country were born blue and tan, but it is generally understood that most of the good ones are born black and tan. In managing, breeding, and exhibiting Yorkshire Terriers, a good and regular amount of exercise is most essential to their general health, as to that of any toy dog. The means by which the necessary amount of exercise is given must be determined by the owner, the condition of the weather having an important bearing upon the question, owing to the length of its coat, and the absolute necessity of preserving it if one expects to be successful in the show ring. A great deal of a dog's appearance depends upon whether or not he be well groomed, and this important operation has probably never been practiced with skill and regularity by many exhibitors, who, on showing their dogs, are surprised to find that they compare unfavorably with others as to their coats. Grooming, to be effective, must be thorough, but it is hard to convince some people of its benefit. Many appliances are more or less used as aids to the Yorkshire Terrier's toilet, and perhaps no better description of the process necessary to be employed in the management and care of these Terriers' coats can be given than that by Mr. G. H. Wilkinson, before referred to. He says, "Beyond taking care of them and keeping their beds dry and warm, very little notice is taken of them till about 3 or 4 months old, when the hair has got rough and begins to show signs of altering color on the skull and down the center of the back. Then begins a long and tedious preparation of daily brushing, to cultivate a parting in the coat. I then slightly grease them all over with the following, which I have always used: 6 ounces of neatsfoot oil, 6 drachms of tincture of cantharides, 6 drops of oil of rosemary. Put into a bottle, and always shake well before applying. This is certain to make the hair grow. One of the main causes why we always keep them greased is to keep the coat straight and free from clots or matting together. They are usually washed once a week and greased again the same day. I also keep each foot tied up in a small stocking or bag to prevent them from scratching or catching their claws in the coat and dragging it out. It is really wonderful the great change and improvement that can be seen each week. When washing, I use a bit of good plain soap. Dog soaps, as advertised, are too strong for their delicate skins. After washing, they should be well dried with a soft towel, placed on a stool in front of a good warm fire, and afterward carefully combed and brushed. I say carefully combed because it is easy to pull off more hair at one time than can be grown again in many weeks, and they should always be combed and brushed till every hair is thoroughly free. If any small clots are left, it will only be so much worse to get out next time. This weekly process must be continued through life if one desires to have the dog's coat perfect. Some dogs grow much more coat than others, however, and all the care and attention in the world won't make some dogs carry more than a moderate amount. It is not advisable to give a small dog of this breed much meat, but a small quantity, well cooked and cut up, mixed with cooked vegetables or bread and gravy, may be fed to advantage occasionally. Their diet should consist mainly of plain food, of a farinaceous and not heating quality, and while some feed but once a day, it is believed to be better to feed them twice. Care should always be taken not to overfeed. The long hair on the head should be carefully tied back on top of the head, especially while feeding, for if allowed to become dirty, it will rot and break at the ends until it is eventually spoiled. For their treatment in sickness and disease, the general subject by Ashmont, contained in another part of this work, should be carefully studied. They require very little medicine, however, and proper care and nursing will frequently do more good in case of sickness than any other treatment. If a laxative is needed, there is nothing safer than a teaspoonful of castor oil. It is likely that some suffering is endured by puppies in shedding their milk or deciduous teeth, and in the Yorkshire Terrier, like most other toy breeds, this begins about the 5th month, and is several months before the permanent set is established. The complete possession of the permanent set should occur before they are 9 months old, but this is only the rule. It is considered necessary by some to extract the milk teeth with instruments as soon as they show signs of loosening, but usually it is best to let nature perform its work in this respect, and lamb or other soft bones may be given at this time. A tooth may be extracted with the finger and thumb if loose enough, but as they are very sensitive about an operation of this kind, it is better not to apply the instrument except in a case where a tooth has remained so long as to become refixed and affects the regular and even growth of permanent teeth. After the permanent set has been established, it is necessary that they be kept clean and white by the same method employed in cleansing human teeth, and the mouth should always be carefully looked after. Also avoid giving whole bones if it is desired to keep the permanent set. Ground or broken bone will do as well, and save the annoyance of a missing tooth, which some people, lacking in experience, may regard as a blemish. Teeth extracted to destroy the evidence of an uneven, defective mouth should not deceive an experienced judge, but the loss of a tooth or two from accidental causes, or even age, should not be considered as a fault or blemish when quality otherwise really exists. The remedies used for preventing and exterminating vermin are numerous, and a Yorkshire must be kept absolutely free from such torments, or its coat will soon be ruined. Some of the disinfectants in common use are very effective and convenient for use in exterminating vermin, and should be used for keeping the surroundings clean as well as on the dog. The practice of docking the tail and cropping the ears of Yorkshire Terriers is almost universal, and while the former operation is accompanied with very little pain, being usually performed at from 4 to 6 weeks after birth, there are good grounds for questioning the practice of cropping the ears, an operation which cannot be performed without pain, for even if anesthetics are employed and proper astringents applied to the wound as soon as possible, there must necessarily be considerable suffering during the process of healing, and while it is generally admitted that an uncropped specimen would stand a small chance of winning under most judges, yet it is sincerely hoped that the sentiment against the practice will prevail, and that the fashion of cropped dogs will be ultimately abolished. In preparing and keeping a Yorkshire Terrier in condition for exhibiting, considerable skill is necessary that it may be properly presented in the show ring. No breed of dogs owes more to condition for show purposes than the Yorkshire, and a dog of this variety exhibited in bad order or unskillfully brushed, when presented to the judge, has a good chance of being beaten by an inferior dog in good hands. Where they are kept exclusively for the house, of course less care is required, but the coat should be kept free and well brushed at all times. It is quite an undertaking to breed a Yorkshire combining the proper color, texture of coat, and correct Terrier type, and no amount of care or attention on the part of the owner can turn a badly bred, ill-formed specimen into a good one. Owing to the fact that the female, like that of other animals, is quite as important an element in breeding as the male, it is necessary to be as careful in selecting the dam as the sire. A faulty specimen of either sex should be avoided for breeding purposes. The theory some people hold that the breeding of a bitch possessing certain faults to a dog that is less faulty where the bitch fails, but possesses opposite ones, is likely to result in the production of a litter of world beaters, is simply but quite forcibly answered by the remark of one of our oldest breeders and judges, who, in discussing the point at one of our shows, said, "I never yet discovered that 2 wrongs would make 1 right." In breeding these dogs, experienced advice should be sought, for injudicious mating is likely to cause the ultimate destruction of type, and it is impossible for the breeder to bestow too much attention in this direction. A good-looking, well-bred dog is more likely to produce stock resembling itself than a good-looking one of unknown or even limited pedigree, and by patient care and attention, intelligent breeders have succeeded in eliminating faults and developing desired qualities in all breeds. The result of the most approved mating will not always prove satisfactory to the breeder, for, as Mr. Wilkinson says, no matter how well bred, there will always be good, bad, and indifferent, and more by far of the last. But there is no doubt that the only foundation for success and for obtaining good ones, whether it be few or many, lies in the most careful attention to mating. These remarks are not intended for those who, by extended experience, are perfectly competent to manage affairs of this kind skillfully, but to those who have not had experience in such matters, it is important to point out the necessity of informing themselves as to the standard type, and of adhering rigidly to it. It is doubtful if any attempt to establish large breeding kennels of Yorkshire Terriers would prove successful. For while there is, and always has been, a steady demand for first-class specimens, yet, owing to their peculiar and regular care, it would be a good day's work for any person, no matter how competent, to keep such a number of specimens constantly in show condition as would be required to maintain a reputation of the kennel necessary to its ultimate financial success. It is a matter of quality, not quantity, that tells in this respect, and the aggregate amount possible to be realized from the business of a large kennel would hardly be commensurate to the cost of its maintenance. The dealer may, and in some cases probably does, conduct a profitable business derived from the efforts of small breeders, and there is no doubt that those who engage in breeding to a reasonable extent, combining business with pleasure, will be rewarded with success in proportion to their efforts. The following detailed description and valuation of the principal points or characteristics of the breed is from the standard prepared and established by the Yorkshire Terrier Club of England. Standard and points of judging the Yorkshire Terrier. Quantity and color of hair on back, value 25. Quality of coat, 15. Tan, 15. Head, 10. Eyes, 5. Mouth, 5. Ears, 5. Legs and feet, 5. Body and general appearance, 10. Tail, 5. Total, 100. General appearance. This should be of a long-coated pet dog, the coat hanging quite straight and evenly down each side, a parting extending from the nose to the end of the tail. The animal should be compact and neat, the carriage being very sprightly, bearing an important air. Although the frame is hidden beneath a mantle of hair, the general outlines should be such as to suggest the existence of a vigorous and well-proportioned body. Head. This should be rather small and flat, not too prominent or round in skull, rather broad at the muzzle, with a perfectly black nose. The hair on the muzzle very long, which should be a rich, deep tan, not sooty or gray. Under the chin, long hair about the same color as the center of the head, which should be a bright golden tan, and not on any account intermingled with dark or sooty hairs. Hair on the sides of the head should be very long, and a few shades deeper than the center of the head, especially about the ear roots. The eyes should be of medium size, dark in color, having a sharp, intelligent expression, and placed so as to look directly forward, but should not be prominent. The edges of the eyelids should also be of a darker color. Ears, cut or uncut. If cut, quite erect; uncut, small, V-shaped, and carried semi-erect, covered with short hair. Color to be a deep, dark tan. The mouth should be good and even. Teeth as sound as possible. A dog having lost a tooth or two through accident, not the least objectionable, providing the jaws are even. The body should be very compact, with a good loin, and level on the top of the back. Coat. The hair as long and straight as possible, not wavy, which should be flossy, not woolly. It should extend from the back of the head to the root of tail. Color a bright steel blue, and on no account intermingled with fawn, light, or dark hairs. Legs quite straight, of a bright golden tan color, and well covered with hair, a few shades lighter at the ends than at the roots. Feet as round as possible, toenails black. Weight divided into two classes, viz., under 5 pounds and over 5 pounds, but not to exceed 12 pounds. Referring to this standard, Mr. Wilkinson says, "Personally, I confess a weakness for color over quantity of coat, as I contend it is quite possible to produce a vast quantity of coat on a specimen otherwise indifferent. From boyhood I remember my father, now deceased, being a great breeder and fancier of Yorkshire Terriers, and he could not tolerate a dog without the rich golden tan, and I certainly inherit his weakness, and think the points most difficult to obtain should be thought most highly of when they are produced. I am rather afraid that of late years too much thought has been given to length of coat in preference to good color and moderate coat combined. A lot of hair with dog attached does not constitute a perfect Yorkshire Terrier." Mr. Bootman also says with relation to this point, "Richness of tan on head and legs should, to my mind, be more cultivated than at present. This property was highly prized by the old breeders. The craze for length of coat has in a great measure been the means of reducing the quality of tan." In connection with the subject of standard, Should be mentioned some of the most common faults noticed in specimens of the breed exhibited at our shows. The most important of these are too round skull (apple head), pointed muzzle, silver colored body instead of blue, fawn colored head and legs instead of tan, mixed coated body made of two or more colors, curly or wavy coat, lack of animation and expression, natural drop instead of semi-erect ears, roached back, light or Dudley nose, uneven mouth, long hair on ears, hind legs heavily coated below hocks, too prominent eyes, and crocked front legs. All these and some other faults should be guarded against in breeding or selecting Yorkshire Terriers, but to find a specimen technically up to the established standard is a practical impossibility. As most of the future prize and other good dogs of this breed in America may reasonably be expected to spring, at least in part, from the best-known winners which have been exhibited at our shows, a brief summary of the principal first prize winners of late years is here given, as far as we are familiar with them, and most of which are well known to the fancy. They are as follows: Champion Bradford Harry, Bradford Lil, Bradford Leah, and Lancashire Ben; Campbell's Prince, Dolly, Spink, Sir Colin, and Dandy; Northfield's Kennels Harry, Fishpool Jem, Toons Royal, Daisy, Little Sister, Jenny, and Floss; Sen's Teddy and Jessie; Cassidy's Ben, Prince, and Jersey Lily; Clancy's Bill and Ben; Carlton's Armand and Bravo; Sylvie's Whiskers and Leo; Borrowscale's Dandy; Daly's Daisy; Sullivan's Lucy; Englehart's Patty; Dull's Una; Healy's Ebor; Rose Patty; Kramer's Midge; Cabot's Lancashire Star; Harrison's Mossy; Meadowthorpe Fairy; Jessie, Damificare, Actor, and Spider. The following persons also own and exhibit good Yorkshires: John F. Campbell, Custom House, Montreal, Canada; Northfield's Yorkshire Kennels, Salem, Massachusetts; P. H. Coombs, 1 Exchange Block, Bangor, Maine; Mrs. J. S. Borer, 3263 Groveland Avenue, Chicago, Illinois; J. C. Cullen, Pittsfield, Massachusetts; Dr. George W. Dixon, 406 Main Street, Worcester, Massachusetts; R. P. H. Durkee, 10 Ashland Block, Chicago, Illinois; E. E. Dodge, Pittsfield, Massachusetts; Michael Goggardy, 71 Gough Street, New Haven, Connecticut; John J. Hooley, Troy, New York; John Hackett, 23 Barton Street, Hamilton, Ontario; John L. Lincoln, Jr., 2 and 4 Wabash Avenue, Chicago, Illinois; R. S. F. Montgomery, 217 South 14th Street, Omaha, Nebraska; W. R. Mack, Rochester, New York; W. D. Reed, Elmira, New York; E. J. Lilly, 53 to 59 Water Street, Cleveland, Ohio; Mrs. E. A. Lincoln, 14 Parker Street, New Bedford, Massachusetts; J. H. Stotts, 3 and 4 Hodge Opera House, Lockport, New York; R. J. McLaughlin, 1762 Euclid Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio; F. G. Anthony, New Haven, Connecticut; E. G. Carlton, 38 Court Square, Boston, Massachusetts; Henry Smith, Buffalo, New York; John McKee, 323 Marcy Avenue, Brooklyn, New York; Mrs. L. D. Cutler, 262 West 34th Street, New York City; George Bell, Walker House, Toronto, Canada; Fred Sen, 278 West 11th Street, New York City; Peter Cassidy, 135 Varick Street, New York City; Bernard Cummings, 340 West 25th Street, New York City; Mrs. W. D. Stewart, Malden, Massachusetts; George McDonnelly, 77th Street, South Boston, Massachusetts; W. A. Pinkerton, 191 Fifth Avenue, Chicago, Illinois; Meadowthorpe Kennels, Lexington, Kentucky; J. Maddox, 4 West 66th Street, New York City; William A. Bragg, 21 Park Street, Bangor, Maine; and Mrs. A. H. Minier, Saranac Lake, New York. The dogs selected by the editor for illustration in connection with this chapter are certainly among the best ever seen in this country, and are distinguished as first prize winners at some of the principal shows in the north of England, where the breed originated, and where the best specimens in the world meet in competition. They are of especial interest in connection with this work as being prominent prize winners at American shows. Bradford Harry is at present, 1890, the only champion of record of his breed in America. He was first exhibited here in 1888, and has appeared in Boston, New York, Troy, Lynn, Buffalo, and New Bedford, where he won 9 first prizes in succession. And in addition, he has made the remarkable record of which few dogs of any breed can boast, viz., that of winning every special prize for which a Yorkshire Terrier was eligible to compete at the shows where he has appeared. In one show alone he won the specials for Best Yorkshire Terrier, Best Rough-Coated Terrier, any breed, and Smallest Dog in the show. His pedigree is as follows: Sire, Crawshaw's Bruce, Dam, Beale's Lady; Bruce by Hodson's Sandy, Patterson's Minnie; Sandy by Bateman's Sandy, Venus; Bateman's Sandy by Spring; Venus by Music; Spring by Huddersfield Ben; Beale's Lady by Tyler Lady; Tyler by Huddersfield Ben, Bolton's Kitty; Kitty by Bolton's Wonder. The Yorkshire Terrier Mozart, bred and owned by Mr. James Alderson of Leeds, England, won for the breed the name Yorkshire Terrier in 1874 or 1875. He lived to the age of 14 years and 10 months, and won during his show career 164 prizes, including 36 cups, according to Mr. Bootman's history. Mozart was by Huddersfield Ben, out of Alderson's Frisk, both of which run directly back to the original Old Crab, Kitty, and Whittam Bitch. Huddersfield Ben was the best stud dog of his breed during his lifetime, and one of the most remarkable dogs of any pet breed that ever lived, and most of the show specimens of the present day have one or more crosses of his blood in their pedigree. Before leaving this engaging breed, we would suggest to the managers of shows that they hardly do justice to its advancement and improvement when, in arranging premium lists, only one class is provided for dogs and bitches, and frequently without regard to weight. It can hardly be expected of breeders and fanciers to bear the necessary expenses consequent to a 4 days' show, often being obliged to ship their dogs long distances for the purpose, to make full entries, when classes are not as liberal as for other prominent breeds, and we do not hesitate to say that it would benefit the show as well as the exhibitor if managers would divide the classes by weight, under 5 pounds and over 5 pounds, as established by standard, and also by sex. But we must condemn the practice of providing puppy classes, if for no other reason than the liability of the puppies contracting distemper, and thus serving as agents through which it may be distributed promiscuously. Furthermore, the Yorkshire Terrier does not mature in coat and color until 3 to 4 years old, and it must be obvious to all that a first prize puppy may be thoroughly unfit for show when matured, and the honor of winning such a prize can therefore be of but little practical benefit to the owner. End of section 27. Recording by Colleen McMahon.